This is the Thrifty Pilot Podcast, where we discuss everything aviation, tips, tricks, and safety without breaking the bank.
So welcome to the second episode of this Thrifty Pilot Podcast. Got an interesting email from pilotworkshops.com. Pilotworkshops.com, not affiliated or anything, but it's pretty cool because they send out tips of the week. And this tip of the week, this week, was all about temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs. Basically, it's a TFR, for those who don't know, is a restricted space in the air that certain aircraft can't fly through. And with general aviation, a lot of times with the general aviation aircraft, you're not able to fly through the majority of a TFR. TFRs are set aside and are special because it allows certain type of operations to go unhindered. Things like wildfire or rescues, or you don't want anybody flying their Cessna over the Super Bowl. So these TFRs are in place. They're temporary for the most part, and they serve a good purpose, again, for the most part. However, I thought it was interesting because when you go on the website and take a look at the actual discussions that are being put through, it's a lot of talk about TFRs and how some TFRs are not so temporary, and then how they are affecting fixed-based operators and flight schools, and certain areas maybe more than others, and how it actually affects our mode of travel when we're in the air. So a few points that I just want to kind of throw out there to start a discussion pretty much about these TFRs. Now, like I said, TFRs have their place with the rescues, with the wildfires, with police trying to make sure that public safety is obtained. But a lot of these comments and questions that I have are with VIPs. So again, for those who don't know, TFRs could be issued when a very important person, such as the president, vice president, come to town. Again, it's a safety element there. I totally understand that. But then there's also VIP issuance where it's not the vice president and the president. So a lot of times you'll go on flight services and you'll see temporary TFRs for people who may not be those vice president, and so on and so forth. And it kind of throws into question there, like, where does the VIP stop? Where's the spectrum stop there? And are they really effectively combating anything like terrorist activities or anything to that effect? Also, with that being said, it affects, for sure, operations within that TFR. So if a TFR is placed in a area or airspace that has a lot of flight schools, that's got to have an effect on flight schools, right? You're literally, if you're under that TFR restriction, you have a general aircraft from that airport, you can't fly from that airport for the length of that TFR, and a flight school can't operate off of there. So it's interesting. You also have things like long-standing TFRs, stuff like Walt Disney World. Now, I understand that. You don't want to, again, have that Cessna pilot just doing circles right over the Magic Kingdom, but you also have ones that are like the presidential TFR that's withstanding up in New York, around the Trump Tower. Has nothing to do, this podcast, with politics or anything to that effect, but it's just pilots are starting to question and have questioned, where, again, in that spectrum does this make sense? Has this really saved anybody anything? Does it make sense to have these temporary flight restrictions and these long temporary flight restrictions? And when you're a pilot, when you're flying your aircraft, fuel is money, right? So it costs a lot to put fuel in your plane, and you want to make the best of the fuel that you have on board. So the website that posed this question asks, has a TFR ever forced you to cancel a flight because it impacted your departure, destination, or route? And there was over 2,500 people that responded, yes, it has. And, it is an inconvenience. And there is safety. And I am not saying we should roll through wildfires or rescues or anything like that. What I'm kind of focusing on here is those long-standing TFRs that may or may not make sense, like the corridor. And then also the VIPs. That's really where I'm harping at here, those VIP designations. Does it really make sense to impose those? And how big should these TFRs expand to? You also have other things like sports games and stuff like that, which may or may not make sense. But again, with TFRs, you can adjust the scope. I know they've done pretty good with the sports games TFRs. They've made them as small as possible, usually directly over the stadium, which is awesome. But the question should be posed and continue to be posed when these TFRs come out. Do they make sense? And I appreciate the comments in here. They're great comments. If you want to read it, you can go to pilotworkshop.com/tips/TFR-clearance, and you can see the comments that I'm referring to there. The good thing is that notice, which are notice to airmen's, come out, and they tell us of a TFR that is about to come out. And usually we get pretty good notification of when these come out, unless something actually happens, like a rescue or something to that effect, where it needs to be put out in advance. But it's just interesting, these TFRs that come out. I'm a pilot in Virginia, and one big TFR that we have to combat, and it actually is a TFR, is the airspace over DC. And if you're not a pilot, it's interesting. You can go on ForeFlight, or you can go on SkyVector, and you can see this big area over DC that we're not able to fly over. General aviation has really particular rules that pilots have to follow to make sure that we're not in this restricted airspace. And even airline pilots, they have to file certain things and make sure they have correct company approvals to get through this airspace, and charter flights, so on and so forth. So it's a very heavily regulated piece of airspace, and it's interesting how far this airspace extends. And I really don't know. Is it appropriate that we have this large sweeping restriction on airspace for general aviation, for charter flights, so on and so forth? Again, it's just questions that we might want to ask as pilots, with these TFRs opening, especially if they have impacts to business. I know when this TFR came on over Washington, there was a lot of airports that really just got hit. There are smaller GA airports within that airspace, and their traffic just went down. Now, again, there are certain things that you can do to get in that airspace as a general aviation pilot. However, if you're an airport and you're an operator inside that airspace, and there's a airport, maybe 10 miles away from that, as a general aviation pilot, I'm just going to go to that other airport. And I feel bad in a way for these airports that had these operations there. So something to think about, something to throw out there. TFRs, does the airspace make sense in certain situations, such as these VIPs and these long-standing airspace, restricted airspace? And then also, can they be modified to help out these smaller airports, to help pilots be able to navigate maybe a channel maybe a direct route through that we have to follow, might be something worth looking at. So just another quick one for you. Hopefully you get something out of this. Maybe it sparks a discussion. As always, stay safe, stay thrifty, and see you soon.
From the Thrifty Pilot, thank you for joining us. Visit thethriftypilot.com for more Thrifty Pilot goodness. Stay safe, stay thrifty, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.